If you ask people to describe Tony Stark's personality, chances are they'll quickly mention his sarcastic sense of humour. While that is absolutely a trait of Stark in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the man barely uttered a single sly quip for the first 45 years of his existence. In fact, he was barely even funny. Of course, though, for as long as film has adapted from other works, changes have been made to the source material. And the personalities of our favourite superheroes and supervillains are no exception. Even in the MCU, which is generally praised by Marvel Comics fans for the quality of its movies, there have been radical changes to the characters in appearance, origin, and most dynamically, their personality. Not all of these changes are bad though. In fact, in some instances, the MCU version actually gets so popular, it ends up influencing the comic book version itself. Worlds collide. Anyway, my name is Adam Cleary, and these are 10 MCU characters that are nothing like the comics. Number 10, Hawkeye. The stoic family man Clint Barton, who keeps to himself in the MCU, is a completely different character than the original in the comics. I mean, for a start, he looks like this. Lol? The MCU Hawkeye is similar to the Ultimate Comics version, who has a similar costume, close ties with S.H.I.E.L.D., and had a stable family life. But still, fans were absolutely not expecting that family reveal in Age of Ultron. Rather, Black Widow's close friendship with Hawkeye in the first Avengers movie made many speculate that their early romance in the comics would play out in the films. Ooh, and indeed, You see, Hawkeye is a criminal turned hero who started out as a bit of a hothead and a hellraiser. He originally had little affiliation with S.H.I.E.L.D., though he did marry Agent Bobby Morse, aka Mockingbird. Yes, her from the TV version. Number 9, Edwin Jarvis. Just a rather very intelligent system, or Jarvis as it's known, was introduced in Iron Man as Tony Stark's artificial intelligence system that operates his armors and other works of genius. In Age of Ultron, he of course becomes the core system of Vision, an android superhero who joins the Avengers. In the comics though, there is only Edwin Jarvis, a middle-aged English butler who is the caretaker of the Avengers mansion. Like, imagine if Alfred was dusting the Justice League satellite instead of the Batcave. Although Jarvis has gotten more involved in Avengers comic storylines in recent years, he has no real connection to Vision, whose creation in the comics had no link to Tony Stark's technology. Coincidentally though, another version of the character was introduced on Agent Carter as the butler of Howard Stark. This version of Jarvis is much more in line with his comics version and is obviously Tony Stark's namesake for Jarvis, but yeah, he'll be dead, won't he? Long dead before the Avengers are formed. Number 8, Starlord. Peter Quill, aka Starlord, is a hilarious do-gooder who leads the Guardians of the Galaxy with humorous quips and clever plans, right? Well, no, actually no, not if you've read any of his adventures in the comics in the late 70s. Far from being abducted by aliens as a child, in the comics Quill was a NASA astronaut who swindled his way into becoming Starlord. He was your default space cowboy type and only made a handful of appearances until he was brought back in 2008. Naturally though, all that changed with the huge success of the Guardians of the Galaxy movie. Nowadays, the Starlord in the comics looks and acts a lot more like Chris Pratt than the character ever did previously. Number 7, Gamora. We're not totally sure how this works in the MCU currently, but in the comics, Gamora's species was completely destroyed by a fanatical cult. She was then adopted and trained by Thanos to become a remorseless, vicious warrior before eventually turning on him to join with cosmic superhero Adam Warlock. Yes, another Adam. In the films, Gamora has a very different appearance, but the same basic backstory. The big twist being, though, that it was actually Thanos who wiped out half/all of her species. Her personality is also far more likable than the supreme warrior depicted in the comics. And in joining the Guardians of the Galaxy, she is portrayed as much more of a team player. Her budding romance with Quill, though, is exclusive to the MCU. Yep, sorry, never once happens in the comics, even if she does bang Iron Man. Number 6, Aldrich Killian. Dr. Killian was a virtual nobody in the Iron Man comics. He developed the robotic technology Extremis as an attempt to replace missing organs, but when he sold a sample to a terrorist group who, lol, oops, used it to create a supervillain, he committed suicide out of shame. All this happened in exactly one issue. The man of the same name, who appeared as the main antagonist of Iron Man 3, shared exactly two things in common with his comics counterpart. A, his name, and B, the fact he developed Extremis. The MCU version is an obnoxious billionaire genius who attempts to use the virus to manipulate the war on terror for his own ends. In fact, Iron Man 3's filmmakers used Killian's obscurity to their advantage. When it was revealed that Guy Pearce was playing him, many fans assumed he had a minor role, rather than, being the big bad, setting Ben Kingsley up as the Mandarin in a classic bait-and-switch move which was universally popular with the fan bit. Oh, wasn't? Alright, okay. Number 5, the Mandarin. Yeah, speaking of the Mandarin, his portrayal in Iron Man 3, I'm reading here, left a bad taste in many fans' mouths. Considered by most fans as Iron Man's arch-villain, the Mandarin in the comics is an expert martial artist, scientific genius, and would-be world conqueror who wields 10 rings with various superhuman powers. Issues with the Mandarin's MCU portrayal in Iron Man 3 began from the very casting. Some were unhappy with Oscar winner Ben Kingsley being cast as the Mandarin because he didn't fit the character's traditionally Asian ethnic background. However, what fans actually got was even more of a piss boiler than this deviation from the source material even suggested. Kingsley played a boozing British actor named Trevor Slattery who was only posing as the Mandarin. While it was a clever plot twist in Iron Man 3, I guess, that managed to surprise in an era when spoilers tend to ruin everything, many comics fans felt it was, well, shit. Thankfully though, a follow-up Marvel one-shot short revealed that there is a real Mandarin out there, but without an Iron Man 4 in the works, who knows if we'll ever see him. Number 4, Talos. So yeah, if you've just seen Captain Marvel, you probably went in expecting to see Talos as the big villain of the piece, being, as he is, pitched as the movie's primary antagonist. And I mean, why wouldn't he be? Talos the Untamed is one of Marvel Comics' most vicious villains. Born with a rare defect, meaning he's one of the few Skrulls who can't shapeshift, he instead pushed all of his other deadly skills to their very limit. He's blue, not green, and is such a fierce warrior, he absolutely beat the piss out of the Hulk. In the film though, yeah, let's have a look. He's a massive banter merchant who wears a polo neck and doesn't like cats, so yeah, a bit different. Number 3, Whiplash. Whiplash has a bit of a complicated history as a comic book character. The original was an employee of Stark Industries who turned criminal, wielded titanium whips, and made infrequent appearances in Iron Man comics from like the 60s up to the 90s. Then in the 1990s, a female Whiplash was introduced who appeared even less frequently. But she was more of a Spider-Man villain than an Iron Man one, and either way, neither of them had much of an intriguing backstory. In Iron Man 2, Mickey Rourke portrayed Ivan Vanko, a Russian ex-convict who builds an arc reactor exoskeleton with electric whips to attack Stark, and is never once actually called Whiplash in the film, even though he was in the marketing. That might be because the name Ivan Vanko came from the name Anton Vanko, who was a Soviet scientist who created the Crimson Dynamo. That's a completely different Iron Man foe, who was basically the Soviet version of Shellhead, who is also a completely different Iron Man foe. As a result of all this, Vanko has since appeared on Agent Carter, and Marvel has introduced an MCU-style Whiplash into the comics. Yeah, wild one, that. Number 2, Yondu, y'all. In the Guardians of the Galaxy movie, Yondu plays a key role as the man who kidnapped and raised Starlord, training him then to become an adventurer. He leads a group of space pirates called the Ravagers and wields a unique arrow-like weapon that he controls by whistling. Now, aside from the blue skin and the mohawk, this version of Yondu might as well just be a completely new character. In the comics, he has no particular connection to Peter Quill and is instead a 29th century bow hunter who formed the original Guardians of the Galaxy team. He didn't lead the Ravagers, he didn't have a really cool whistle-controlled arrow weapon, and was a relatively minor character who would likely have drifted into comic book obscurity had it not been for the MCU. Instead, he's now immortalized in cinema legend for quoting Mary Poppins. Number 1, Peggy Carter. Peggy Carter became a breakout character in the MCU thanks to the strong portrayal by Hayley Atwell in Captain America. So good, in fact, they gave her own TV series. In the MCU, Atwell is a tough-as-nails, resourceful British agent who was involved in the Captain America project and becomes the love interest of Steve Rogers before he, well, decks it into the ice. In the comics, though, she is a blonde American born in Virginia and doesn't even meet Captain America until she runs off to France during World War II. Plus, instead of being a strong-willed agent, her character was portrayed as losing her mind after Rogers' disappearance. While Carter did later join S.H.I.E.L.D. in the comics and fought alongside the revived Captain America in the 60s and 70s, Marvel's, let's call it flexible timeline means that now he's been revived in the 21st century, she's a very old woman. In fact, it's now Carter's niece Sharon who becomes Captain America's primary modern-day love interest, which, as I've said 1,000 times now, is really gross. So there you have it, 10 Marvel film characters who are nothing like they appear in the comics. And no, before you ask, I am exactly the same as I am on the film channel as I am over here. Let us know what you made of it all in the comments below, and of course don't forget to like, share and subscribe. But in the meantime though, thank you very much for watching. I have of course been Adam Cleary, and I'll see you soon.